Hello and welcome to the On the Couch podcast, the podcast that gives you the view from the therapist's chair. I'm your host, John Dennis, a licensed professional counselor. You're listening to OTC Episode 12, Relationship 911, Part 2. Hello again, and a huge thank you to all of our listeners checking in out there. So this week, I come to you from beautiful Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a little cold and nasty out. We had a couple inches of snow today, so one last snowstorm probably before heading into spring here. Normally, I would be playing ice hockey right now, but I am here with you all. So the phone number for the show is 717-897-0577, or you can email questions in to info@parentfamilysolutions.com. So as I mentioned, this is part 2 in a series. You can check out part 1 from 2 weeks ago, where we talked about investing in your relationship, spending 15 minutes a day together. We talked about the Gottman card deck app and the 4 Horsemen, stress-reducing conversations. So a lot of really good information in there. I would definitely go back and check that out just to get caught up to speed because it's a lot of useful stuff to put into play in strengthening your relationship. But this week, we're going to be talking about the 5 love languages. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman and his book, The 5 Love Languages, it's another one that I almost always recommend across the board for everybody. And they've really been expanding their offerings in the last couple of years, expanding it beyond just romantic couples. They've if you go on the website, just the number 5, lovelanguages.com, you can take free quizzes on the website. They have quizzes for couples and adults. They have quizzes for kids and families. They have quizzes for the love languages, for apology languages, and for anger languages. And I typically recommend, sort of the works. Go take them all. Know yours, know your partners. And the apology language one we'll be touching on a little bit later, and I'll be covering that in the blog series that I do as well. So if you're not familiar with the concept of the 5 love languages, basically the understanding is that there's more than one way to express love, to show love. And not always, but typically the language that we're most fluent in, our number 1 or our number 2 love languages, are ones that were modeled to us and taught to us in our relationships and families growing up. And typically that's the way that we express love is also the way that we want to receive it, although not always. And so often in the Gottman couples counseling that I do, it's either couples don't know the concept and they don't know what their primary love language is or their partner's primary love language. They don't know. And so in no particular order, the 5 love languages that Gary Chapman teaches about are receiving gifts, acts of service, quality time, physical affection, and words of praise or affirmation. And like I was saying, it's huge to know what yours and your partner's is. And in the couples that I work with, and in just friends, family, my own relationship, it's so common that you see people have opposite love languages, or it's very rare, I've found, for couples to have the same love language. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, obviously, opposites attract, and it's often important in our couple relationships or romantic relationships for us to balance each other out. But it's really important to, like I said, just to know what yours is and what theirs is, and work on becoming a little bit more fluent, so to speak, in that love language. That's the one your partner is the most fluent in, and that's the one that means the most to them. So I always explain it as, it's not that you have to ditch your love language. Your love language is bad and you should stop using it, and you have to only use those other ones, or vice versa, that your partner's is bad and they have to stop using that one and only use yours. It's just that you're going to typically get more mileage, more recognition. It's going to have more of a positive effect for using the one that they recognize the most. It's going to be easier for them to spot. They're going to appreciate it more typically. And so what I'll do here is I'll kind of go through each of the 5 and kind of unpack that. So starting with the acts of service, a lot of times people struggle with this one because they almost see it as like, well, that's not a love language. That's just being a good partner or a good mom or dad or things like that. That those are just things everybody should do. And a lot of times with acts of service, these are kind of the subtle little things behind the scenes. You think of the mom that packs your lunch, or takes you to practice, or study group studies or things like that. Just the little things that people do to show that they care about you. Everything from de-icing somebody's car and warming it up for them in the morning, or starting the morning ritual by making the coffee just the way the other person likes, or things like that. And the other thing that I often explain is a lot of these are usually going to hit one or more love languages at the same time. So you think of the act of service of, I was out and I got you coffee. That could also be gifts as well. And just as important as knowing your partner's love language and yours, it's also important for couples to talk about those and define, okay, what does that mean? That idea of an act of service for you. What are the things that you really appreciate? What are the things that mean the most to you in terms of acts of service? So the next is physical affection. And like I was saying, it's important to define that, being able to know, okay, well, what is acceptable and what's not, with public displays of affection. Some people, that makes their skin crawl. They feel very uncomfortable expressing love physically in front of other people. Whereas to others, that's just a normal, natural thing of like, yeah, we hold hands. Like we always do that when we're out walking together, or, arm around one another. Here I'll say, especially for any of you who has a partner that has experienced any type of physical or sexual abuse in their childhood or young adult life or things like that, just anywhere in their past, this one is really important to talk about because I always try to explain for partners that they weren't the one that experienced the abuse. You really need to know what are those triggers for that other person, because if you surprise somebody from behind and hug them, like you could get punched, you could get stabbed. Like you need to be careful. That could really set somebody else off. That could make them extremely uncomfortable. It could trigger a panic attack or a flashback. Same thing with like touching somebody on their neck, or trying to initiate physical affection when you have had alcohol and when there's alcohol on your breath. There's a lot of important things to that love language of physical affection. And it's important, like I said, to really hash that out and talk about that. And going back to part one of this series, that idea of the four horsemen, you need to watch out for those four horsemen as you're talking about these things. You want it to be a positive as opposed to getting defensive and counter-criticizing and things like that. And a few other important things about that love language of physical affection with regard to past trauma experiences is in discussing it, so often in the couples work that I do, one partner will get very hurt, very offended, typically the partner that has not experienced the abuse, and they will say things like, "But you can trust me. That's not me. I didn't do that to you," or "I would never do that to you. Don't you know that?" Or "I feel like I'm paying for what this other person has done to you." And I usually have to kind of camp out right there and break it down for them and explain, I get that hurts when somebody else recoils from your physical affection, but it's a lot of times, so often, it's a lack of understanding of the impact that trauma can have on a person and the after effects that you can say, "You can trust me," or "I would never do that to you," as many times as you want. It's not going to change what happened to that person and the abuse that they experienced. And often I reference Bessel van der Kolk's book. His name is quite a mouthful, but Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and that's one that I reference all the time for people to check out and familiarize themselves with so they can really, really understand just the full impact that abuse and trauma has on a person. And we'll kind of get into a couple of other things after I go through the others. So the next love language is quality time. So with quality time, same thing, just being able to talk about, what does this mean to you? What does it mean to me? So I always say, somewhat jokingly, but serious as well, like for me, my wife and I sitting down and watching a hockey game would be like a dream come true. Like that's an awesome night for me, to be able to watch hockey and spend time together, as long as my team wins. But for my wife, that is not her idea of quality time. And some people that they feel that, okay, well, watching TV, watching a movie, that's not really us connecting. That's just us being in the same room doing the same thing. To other people, quality time is us, it's an intimate connection. We're paying attention to one another. We're talking to one another, looking at one another. And I do stress, going back to part one, that with the 15 minutes a day, that is very important. That type of quality time together is crucial for continuing to build and strengthen and invest into your relationship. But for a lot of people, that quality time becomes so important, especially as you think of most adults and relationships. We don't get a whole lot of time. You spend most of your time either sleeping or at work. You're doing stuff with the kids, if you have them. You're, running all over the place, taking care of, the house and the bills and just all the things that come with adult life. And so quality time typically goes way down as you move further and further through a relationship. And that one is important, I would say, for every couple to have some of that. You almost think of like an investment portfolio and the idea of diversifying. It's important to use all 5 of these love languages, but like I said, knowing what your number one, number two is, and what your partners are, and then trying to fill in with the other ones as well. So the next love language is receiving gifts. So with receiving gifts, Dr. Gary Chapman stresses, it's not just the materialism, just the I want stuff. I want you to, lavish me with gifts. But that idea of the time, the effort, and the thought that goes into the gift, and especially the big ones. You think of like anniversaries, birthdays, and again, some people, they talk about that and they communicate. You know what? This time around, like I don't really expect anything big, or let's not get each other gifts this Christmas. Let's do this instead. But even the little things doesn't have to be, oh, I got you something from Tiffany's, or, it's something like crazy over the top, but just that thought that goes into it. Some of you think back on some of your earlier parts of your relationship. Yeah, especially depending on what age you were at, you may not have had a lot of money, but the fact that you knew the other person enough to know, like, oh, I saw this, I was thinking of you, and I knew you would love this, or I just, I was really looking forward to getting this for you, and I'm, they can tell. To them, it's that idea that you were thinking enough of them, and you were on their mind even when they were away from you. That's part of what that receiving gifts says to them. And again, that idea of communicating it and well, what do you consider a gift, and what does that mean? Part of this is I would definitely say the absence of the gift, it would be more detrimental. That idea of like you forgot Mother's Day or didn't get an anniversary present or something like that. Usually that's more damaging. A lot of times talking with people about, okay, how do you put things in place to know that, okay, this love language is important to this person, and that's not mine. I'm not gifted in gifts. I am not, and my brain doesn't work that way. So what can you do instead? So definitely, crowdsourcing, like privately, hit up the family, the friends, and like, hey, I'm really struggling to think of a good gift. Help me out. Setting reminders, using your whatever tech you have to work for you, to set a reminder to get stuff ahead of time. Don't leave it till the last second. Those things are just so huge. And lastly, words of affirmation or words of praise. And these are the kind words, the compliments, just noticing the little things that the other person has done, or things that, like, wow, I'm really proud of you for doing that. Or, I've noticed you're really, really good at that. You're really creative. You're really talented in, art or cooking or, whatever the things are that your partner does. Draw attention to it, point it out, say it, a lot of times in working with couples, a lot of times I'll hear one partner or another say like, well, they know that I love them. And usually I point out like, yeah, they probably do know, but it's still nice to hear. It's nice to hear that somebody is proud of you, or somebody thinks you're attractive, or that, somebody knows that you love them. They say with, thinking of like going back to having a child, having a baby, with a baby, you can never like hold them too much or like spoil them, like that right out of the gate, right as an infant, you can't overdo it. And same kind of thing I would say in our love language with our relationship of, that stuff is important to say and keep saying. Going back to part one and the Gottmans, one of the things that they teach is with what they call master couples, so couples that are doing better than not, that they're headed in the right direction, they're strengthening their relationship. They are using a ratio of positive to negative interaction at a much higher rate. So I think it's like somewhere between like 5 to 8 positive statements to 1 negative statement. And, I think a lot of us have heard that, for every negative, you need to say 3 or 4 positives. This, again, it's kind of the theme throughout that I keep going over is communicate about it. What is meaningful to you? And what's meaningful to your partner? They may say, well, I like it when you notice that, I did something for you, and being able to draw attention to that. And for a lot of people, that idea of like, I like you to initiate it and notice it without me having to say something. You think of sort of the stereotypical person gets a haircut, and they don't want to have to say something and say like, oh, well, don't you like my hair? Didn't you notice? Like, they want you to initiate that and draw attention to that. You're listening to OTC Episode 12, Relationship 911, Part 2. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
Life is hard, but Parenting and Family Solutions is here to help. Our board-certified counselors are easy to talk to and offer a safe, encouraging environment to help you with your unique needs. We specialize in helping clients of all ages deal with depression, anxiety, marriage issues, screen addiction, and ADHD, just to name a few. We now have daytime and evening appointments available in Harrisburg and Lancaster and accept most major insurance plans. Visit our website to learn more at www.parentfamilysolutions.com or give us a call at 717-602-5560. Let us help you build a stronger family and a healthier you.
So another really important concept that I want to speak to with the 5 love languages is it takes practice. Like I was saying, typically, using your partner's love languages are things that you may not always be fluent or gifted in. It may not come as naturally to you. So it's going to take a little bit of forethought and planning and effort. Be intentional about it. And at the same time, really guard against those 4 horsemen. I try to stress, just using their love language once, you're not going to see this like amazing reaction to it, and it's going to like bowl your partner over. Sometimes they may not be paying attention, and so it's going to take repeated use over time. And here, a lot of times, I think of, you sort of think of that like cat that like, they bring you a dead animal and they're like, oh, look what I've done for you. I brought this for you. And you're, like get that away from me. Like, why do you keep bringing me dead birds? Like, what is that? And the other that I always think of is, so Stacy in Wayne's World, that idea of like, I got you a gun rack. You're like, I don't even own a gun, let alone enough guns to like, what am I going to do with a gun rack, Stacy? Like, I don't need this. But that idea of, you're not always going to see immediate returns on using a love language one time. And it's going to take that practice and that using it over time. And the other piece to this, especially a lot of times, not to be sexist or stereotypical, but for a lot of guys, the physical affection is usually very high on their list. And the complaint that I hear is, well, our sex life, our love life it's not as frequent as I want. I get rejected. And a lot of times I have to try to explain that takes time, and that takes connecting on those emotional levels, and the trust and the safety being there, and a lot of times using some of the other stuff first for the physical affection to especially on a sexual level to be there, to show up. And it's not always oh, well, I did this. I used the gifts or the words of praise or things like that. So that means the sex is going to show up automatically, right? Like it's 1 for 1 every time. No, it's not a mathematical equation. It doesn't work that way. And that's also where the getting back into the dating relationship becomes so important, investing back into that. So another concept that I want to share with you guys as one that I have actually stolen from some very good friends of ours. Steve and Mary Prokopchuk run a ministry called Called Together. If you go to calledtogether.org, you can find their website and the premarital and other books that they've written. So they have a book called Together and Staying Together. And the concept is a 6-month or a 1-year check-in. And this is something that my wife and I learned from them, and we have done this and have loved it. And I teach, I think everybody should do this, whether it's individual, couple, family, but that idea of scheduling and going on a 6-month check-in, a 1-year check-in at the beginning, especially at the beginning of a marriage, I would say 6-month check-ins for the first couple of years. And the idea is going away. Don't do a staycation. Go away far enough away that you can't get called back. And like stick around to take care of the bills or the laundry or any of that stuff. Like you want to go away together. And typically I would say you want to plan a long weekend at least. Because you want time to actually enjoy the vacation, wherever it is you're going. You want to enjoy, just being at that place and seeing the sights, eating at the restaurants, spending time together, all of those things. But a large focus during the 6-month check-in is to plan to talk about, okay, what do we want the next 6 months of our life to look like? What do we want the next 6 months to look like as an individual and as a couple and as a family, depending on if you have children or not? And also, if this is not the first 6-month check-in that you're going on, looking back at the last 6 months. And, I always say every company knows, okay, first quarter, second quarter, third, like they have that rhythm to the fiscal calendar, and they plan and forecast, and they have key performance indexes and goals that they're trying to hit. And so often in our couple relationships, we don't think of it that way, and we don't plan it out, to our detriment often. And usually I recommend for couples to, plan a couple days ahead or weeks ahead to think some of this stuff out. And okay, what are some of your goals? What are some things you want to improve upon or change? And really thinking about what are the parts of an individual person and their identity, and what are the parts of our relationship and that identity, and what do we want it to be? What do we want it to look like? Is that as an individual, okay, well, you have your career or physical, just exercise and health, our sexual relationship, our friends, our family life. What about education or just hobbies? So, really looking at these things and be honest with yourself and your partner and kind of give yourself a grade on how do I feel like I'm doing and what do I feel like I need to change. And like I was saying, it doesn't have to be this, closed door like summit meeting where like you lock yourselves away and never come out. Like, no, you're not going to be able to do this all in one sitting. You want to, talk about it a little bit here and there, different points. And as you get going, the 6-month check-in part of the vacation won't be as big a part. You'll get it more into a rhythm, and you'll also be talking about it outside of the 6-month check-in. When you're going about your daily life, you'll talk about that more and be checking in with each other. But it's yeah, that idea of this concept is such a game changer. And if any of you happen to know Steve and Mary Prokopchak, I mean, they're just amazing people. Just the love that they have for each other, for their kids and their grandkids, and the world around them, all the people that they impact. It's just so evident, and so I'm so glad I get to share with you this concept, because like I said, it's one that we've used and have seen just so much benefit from it, because like I said, people just don't think about it this way. And I always love that Zig Ziglar quote of, if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. You have to aim at something. And if you want there to be changes in your relationship, you have to talk about it. You have to bring it up and be able to look at, you know what, it actually is pretty important for me to have some friends and develop some other relationships or other hobbies. Or, you know what, I've really been thinking I think I want to go back to school. I think I want to pursue a certification in this. Or, you know what, I wanted to take a couple of classes, and maybe not toward any certification, just staying sharp, keeping learning things. And it starts to become fun, that idea of like planning it out and getting excited about the vacation and getting intentional about where you're headed in your life and life as a couple. All right, so we have a couple more questions this time around for our questions for the couch section. So first up, we have Rick, a local question from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he is asking, is one love language the best? And so, Rick, I would say the best love language is your partner's love language. No, there isn't one that's like the best, or the everyone should speak this one love language. They're equal. But like I was saying, just the importance over what is your partner's love language, because like I said, that's the one they're going to know the most. They're going to be able to spot it the easiest. You're going to get the most recognition and benefit out of using that one. But it's not like one is a better love language than any other. So great question, though. Thanks. Our second question comes from Chrissy in Culpeper, Virginia, and she asks, how do I talk to my boyfriend about when I'm calling a timeout and get emotionally flooded? So, Chrissy, I'm assuming what you're saying is when you get really angry and you get to the point of shutting down and you're trying to call a timeout and he is not having it. He keeps after you. So I'll try to answer it that way and hope that that's the way you're asking it. So if that's not it, you can email me back and we'll go from there. But this happens so much. What I would say is, one, when things are calm, when you haven't had a fight or a blow up, you want to develop specific language for how do we call a timeout. And I don't get into, do that however you guys deem fit, and work to establish rules about, okay, when one of us calls a timeout, this is what each of us is going to do. Try to establish a specific time limit, and then reassure them that you're going to come back afterwards. And for your boyfriend, I would say have him listen to this part of the podcast, because usually what I explain to people that they really struggle to let the other person go away is the way I was. So I was raised hunting. I grew up hunting from a very young age. And I usually reference that. The analogy doesn't always land with everybody, but especially for a lot of guys, it does land. And that is when you're learning deer hunting, specifically from a tree stand, what they teach you actually is if you shoot a deer and it's not a kill shot, you don't drop it dead right there, the deer will get shot and run away, and it will typically run away from wherever it has been shot, and it will run to water. Typically, it will go bed down, and it knows what's happening. It knows that it's been shot, and nature is going to take its course. And what they teach hunters is you're supposed to wait a pretty significant amount of time, 30 to 40 minutes a lot of times, before you get out of your tree stand and go track it. And if you do that, if you're patient enough to wait, you will have less of a battle tracking the deer because it will not have run as far. If you get out of your tree stand right then and there and go after it, you're going to keep spooking it and jumping it up, and it's going to keep running until it bleeds out and dies. I'm sorry for the graphic image there, but that idea that you can be chasing it quite a long ways if you keep doing that. And the same thing happens in our relationships. You think of those TV drama movie scenes where the couple is fighting and somebody peels off in anger and they're firing, multiple texts and phone calls and, trying to get the other person to come back, and it's having the opposite effect. It's pushing them further and further away. So I try to paint that picture of if you'll let the other person go, they will calm down faster and come back to the table quicker and with less drama if you will allow them to do that. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that helps. It's one that I get a lot. But like I said, if that wasn't what you were looking for, just email me and I'll try to answer it a little bit better next time. All right? Thank you. So again, just to recap, the importance of knowing that concept of the 5 love languages and being fluent in them, using them more in your interactions with your partner is crucial. And that idea of a 6-month check-in, a 1-year check-in is something to try. Give it a shot. What do you have to lose? And it like I said, it really is such a huge benefit. I've seen so many good things come out of it. So yeah, that wraps up episode 12, part 2 in the Relationship 911 series. Thank you guys, as always, for stopping by. I hope that this has been helpful and that you are able to put some of this stuff into practice in your relationships and your families and see the benefits of it. Once again, the number to call in for future episodes, 717-897 0577, or you can email your questions to info@parentfamilysolutions.com. Otherwise, I will see you guys in 2 weeks for episode 13 and part 3. Take care. If you liked what you've heard on the podcast, please be sure to subscribe and review wherever you're catching this podcast at. You can check out any links and resources on our detailed show notes or other episodes that have been archived at www.parentfamilysolutions.com/podcast. If you want to catch up on what Parenting and Family Solutions is doing, be sure to follow us on any of your favorite social media apps. This is your host, John Dennis, saying good night. The author and host of this podcast is not engaged in a therapeutic relationship with the listener and cannot give counseling advice without a confidential appointment. Listeners should be sure to consult with a licensed therapist in their area or seek emergency medical attention if they are experiencing psychological difficulty. A special thanks to the Topsy Turvies for the show theme song. Their song, Like a Living Dead, can be found at topsyturvies.bandcamp.com. The bump interview track was the song 1973 by Bruno E. The author and host of this podcast is John Dennis. Special thanks to producer and editor Trevor Groff.